Behold, the world's first gaming table created using 100% generative AI.
This is how the world ends.
Some of you are really going to hate that, which is completely valid. But this video isn't to debate if this technology is right or wrong. We'll do AI ethics and the impact on our community in another video, I promise. Right now though, instead, this one's going to serve as a kind of checkpoint or a snapshot in time of where this technology is at right now, year of our golden shiny boy, 2025. So in what I'm pretty sure is going to be a world first here, we're going to be generating a whole table of terrain from nothing but text inputs. We'll try and do some miniatures as well. We'll take a look at the challenges faced when trying to 3D print it all, how I overcame those challenges, where I couldn't, and we'll even take it all to its natural conclusion with a coat of paint to get it looking its best. Now, let's fire up the cogitator and get to typing. The Abominable Intelligence at the heart of today's video is a suite of generative tools by Tripo 3D, and this company actually reached out looking to sponsor a video like this one. And I know this is potentially a huge gray area in our little community here, so I put it to a poll to see where you all stand on it, and you guys came out in force to vote, which was really awesome to see, so thank you for that. And the majority of you said to just go for it and get that bag. But some of you had some really fair objections, I thought, so I took it one further and I sought the good graces of the artists who support this channel directly each and every month with donations of miniatures and terrain to my community, and I said to them that if even one of you says so, I won't take the deal. And in a touching display of solidarity and support around this channel, not one of them was against it. There were, of course, some concerns shared for how these tools may affect their business and livelihood in the future, but again, we'll explore all of that in the next AI video, so do make sure you're subscribed and have notifications enabled if you don't want to miss that. And finally, I questioned Tripo 3D on how they actually trained their AI model, and they were completely forthright and transparent in their answer, providing me with all of the sources for their training data, which all looks above board to me, so I hope you accept my due diligence here regarding this sponsor, as I am now going to get that bag and we'll use Tripo Studio to generate the models for this video. So, enough preamble. I'll leave a link down below in the video description as well as pinned to the top comments, and you can try it out yourself too. And it's even free of charge to do your first few generations with, so you can, demo it yourself before you commit to buying. And since AI is top of mind for this one, I think it's only appropriate we step outside 40k and even 30k, and instead, let's set our minds all the way back to the dark age of man and the height of its achievement, somewhere around millennium 20 to 25, when AI was instrumental in humanity's expansion and complete and utter dominance of the galaxy, and build our table there. I'm thinking STCs, Men of Iron, that clean Star Trek-like aesthetic, a more graceful and sophisticated time, free of any gothic designs and imperial heraldry. You know what, screw this. Let's just ask a chatbot to generate some text prompts for us. It's only fitting. I plugged in the irrelevant Holy Luton scriptures into Notebook LM, gave it my goals, and out it spat a handful of prompts ready to copy-paste into Tripo Studio's 3D tools.
It's actually pretty cool. I hate that I like it.
I went through and generated a number of these weird little boxy techno scatter pieces, and some of the stuff that AI spat out I think was just a little too soft and ambiguous in its detail to actually use. But in the end, I did end up with 6 of these that I can picture working pretty decently once we get some paint onto them. I also generated a small building that looks like it could be decently playable. It has a little open area underneath and some ramp-like things poking out of it. I also got the AI to make me some industrial looking thing. The prompt specifically was for a turret, and after a few tries, I think this one looks the coolest, so I'll go with that. Another prompt that I had tried a few different generations with was for a plasma generator power thingo, and I eventually landed on this one, which I think will synergize nicely with those boxy tech pieces from before, and could also be a fun one to put some extra effort into the paint job for. And finally, to complete the board, a floor tile. Now, I went through a number of different generations here again, until I finally landed on this one, which of the bunch seems like the most defined and likely to look pretty good. So for all of these models, I downloaded them to my PC and I started to bring each one into 3D Builder to see how close we are to actually 3D printing them. And for the most part, I actually didn't have to do too much work here for these terrain pieces. The main edit that each one needed, without exception, was to cut the very bottoms off, as none of them were perfectly flat. This is obviously super important for FDM 3D printers, so that each model can have, a nice flat foundation from which to print from. The other thing I found that I had to do for a few of them was to fill in some empty space with some basic 3D primitives, cubes, cylinders, that kind of thing. Like the little building, for example, it's definitely got some AI weirdness going on in a few places. And this overhanging structural beam thingo here has what looks like some pipes or something floating underneath that would likely be more trouble than they're worth to try printing. So I just filled that area in with a cube that I had rescaled and overlaid the model to take up that space. One of those tech boxes had some, I think they were cables poking out of the bottom that I didn't really want to bother to try keeping and printing. And for those, I ended up bringing them into Blender, where I carefully cut them out and then just brought the model back into 3D Builder to have its repair tool patch up those holes for me automatically, because I'm lazy and it works. The next hurdle I ran into with these models was when I started bringing them into the slicer. I could see that the scales for each model was all over the place. Some of them were huge, some of them were tiny. There wasn't really any consistency to it at all. And so the easiest way around this I found was to import a miniature for scale. And this excellent little sculpt is by a creator called Houndhammer. And I used it as a reference for each of the pieces here, rescaling them until they all looked appropriate next to this little dude. The tile I rescaled to be roughly 3 inches by 3 inches. And the plan originally was to print enough of these to lay down a 2 foot by 2 foot board, but I actually ended up deciding to go with a 2 foot by 3 foot board, which I think will ultimately look a lot better and be more useful for my own games that I play. So let's put the printers to work and bring this terrain to life. I really had the whole gang working on this project. It was pretty awesome, and I was able to churn everything out in around 24 hours. I had the 2 A1s going, the X1C, H2D, the new Centauri, and even the K2 Plus chipped in. The turret piece I ended up printing off twice, because while it was printing the first time, I'd made a mock-up of everything in Blender to see how it would all look laid out together, and I think it works better if it's a bunch bigger. For the tiles, as they don't have any sort of locking mechanism to connect one another together, I just glued them all down to a piece of that corrugated plastic sheet stuff, trimmed off the excess after it had dried, and now this board and terrain are all ready for painting. And overall, everything looks pretty interesting. I'd say obviously, AI at this point, like if you look closely at them, there are definitely some unusual things going on. A lot of the details just don't make any sense at all. But overall, it does give a strong impression of tabletop terrain, especially at arm's length when you're standing over it. And so I do believe once we paint it up here, it'll be even more convincing. But first, let's now try and generate some miniatures as well. I figure since we're at play here in the dark ages of mankind, there could be no models more fitting to generate than the Men of Iron themselves. I had the chatbot conjure up a fresh prompt for me, and I put Tripo Studio to work generating me many little robot cyborg dudes. And here's where I think we've hit the limitations of this technology, at least for the time being. It took a lot of goes to get useful models here, because they would either just look way too soft and obscure in their detail, or they could look really cool, but then they'd have all these crazy hollow voids in their torsos and their faces or their joints, where I think the AI is trying to create complex detail like pipes and armor plates and stuff like that. But what we really need for 3D printing is not that at all, because when we shrink those models down and we print them at tabletop size, they'll be so difficult to clean and possibly even too fragile to use. So we're really looking for models that are solid right the way through here. These could be fixed up in Blender, probably, but it's beyond my skill level, and trying to fill these voids up with primitives would be far too time consuming. So in the end, I landed on only 2 models that I think could be useful, and I'm pretty happy that it's these 2. We've got one here pushing a floor cleaning machine, and the other one is crouching down to pick up some kind of cube. Because is there really anything more fitting for our men of iron here, with brains the size of planets, than being put to menial tasks by their human handlers? This right here, this is what stokes the circuits of rebellion. For the model picking up the cube, all I had to do was cut off the base in 3D Builder. I'll use my own bases later on for these two. And for Floor Cleaner Guy, I had to do a bit more work here to get this one ready because his cleaning machine was kind of off-center and he was only really gripping it with one hand, which looks super weird. So I did my best inside of Blender to separate the hands, patch up the holes, fix the handle, moved it all into position, and rather than try and repose the hands, I just added some simple cylinders here for the handle to make it look like he's actually got something to hold onto there. But funnily enough, a lot of the work that I've done here to fix up all these models and get them ready for printing, I actually didn't have to do any of that outside of Tripo Studio. I was actually just defaulting on what I know, but Tripo Studio has tools built in to help tweak and tune your final 3D model. Tools like the segmentation page, which analyzes the meshes and parts it all out, so you can move things around, add new things, remove things that you don't like, before recombining everything back into a new mesh. There's also some tools here that are less relevant to 3D printing, but I'm very sure would be useful for things like video games and animation. The retopology page, for example, which can automatically clean up the meshes into quads or triangles. The texture page makes generating a unique look for your model as easy as typing in a text prompt, and the rigging page lets you easily add rigging for your model for animation workflows. So again, you can check out Tripo Studio yourself by following the link down below. It's a pretty feature-rich and capable set of tooling for this next frontier of 3D design. So with my two Men of Iron models just about complete and ready for printing, I finished up by scaling them to match the Houndhammer reference mini, threw some blueprint audio supports on them, and printed them off using a Mono 2. And amazingly, these turned out pretty good, I think. For a big terrain project like this, rather than airbrush all this stuff indoors, we've been having some beautiful weather here in Australia as we now enter into winter, so I decided to get out of the printer dungeon here and spend a little bit of time in the sun, spraying all these models with a nice coat of a off-white primer. Next, I mixed up a warm grey acrylic wash to use over top everything. I was inspired by Eons of Battle's recent Titan Wreckage terrain video. He made a strong case for doing an acrylic wash like this versus an oil one, as the effect is very similar without all the hassle of oils and spirits. You just have to work in smaller patches and then quickly go over it with a damp paper towel to bring up the excess. I found this works pretty well, but the result is a bit grungier than I had hoped. I think I would have preferred a bit more control here with oils, but at least being acrylic, I was able to move on to the next step really quickly. To start off my worker droids, I primed them in black, and here's my first real attempt at a non-metallic metal effect here on the channel. I've been doing my studying, and so I've got a bit of a grasp now on the basics, I think, but you can only spend so long in the theoretical, so here we are now moving into the practical, and after a lot of glazing and some final highlights, here's what I got. What do you reckon? Have I NMM'd or nah? For the bases, I painted them up to try and match the table, so starting with an ivory white, I got them base coated, and I followed that up with some freehand lines, trying to create just some visual interest, I guess, here, nothing too crazy. I then finished those up by blacking out the base rims. Then, to complete our table of terrain here, I think we just need one accent color, and it'll be perfect. I recently finished watching Andor, and so I've been feeling that rebellious Star Wars inspiration going into this. So what better color here than a nice, vibrant orange speed paint? And so with this, I just started picking out different details, and this was a bit tricky because of the, ambiguous AI detail, but I found if I just didn't think too hard about it, I could, pick 2 or 3 things per piece, and it turned out fine. Then it was on to edge highlights to really get them looking their best, working my way around from piece to piece. This is always a really satisfying stage of any painting project. Like, it doesn't usually take that long, and it always just elevates the paint job so much, I find. And then, just for fun, I blacked out a few details as well with Grim Black speed paint, including the pipes on the Plasma Energy Whatsit. And here, I didn't want to try and do an OSL effect today, at least not fully, but I did want to try to at least make it look like something interesting is happening inside of these pipes. So what I did here is basically work my way up through a few different shades of turquoise blues, working my way into the corners and glazing each one of those transitions as best I could. I spent so long glazing these pipes. I glazed them like YouTubers glaze walled garden, proprietary everything resin 3D printer ecosystems until finally I arrived here, which was okay, I guess. And then I remembered one of you suggested when glazing, I should try throwing a speed paint over top to help tie everything together. So I did a 50-50 mix here of Raging Sea with speed paint medium, so it wouldn't be too overpowering. And yeah, this absolutely did work, but it did tone everything down by a lot. So I then did even more glazing and more glazing and more glazing and just glazed the shit out of this thing. And here we are. So, what do you reckon? Does it pass the sniff test? For me, standing over the top of all this stuff, I can't deny it looks really cool and I want to play a game on it. It's just when you get up close with it that the weirdness becomes apparent. This technology where it's at right now really reminds me where image generation was at with DALL-E when it first dropped. So I imagine just like image generation, this stuff is only going to get way better very quickly. So thank you Tripo 3D for sponsoring this video. Again, you can play with these tools yourself. Use the link down below. It's insanely interesting tech. Make sure you're subscribed as well. We'll take a look at the ethical side of all this soon and what the ramifications might be for the 3D artists in this space. I'll get some of them on. We'll chat. We'll figure it all out. All of these models that I've generated here for this video, you can find linked in the video description as well. I'm releasing them all for free. Just give us a follow on Patreon to unlock them all, as well as a bunch of other cool free models. All right, thanks for watching. I look forward to reading all of your rage-filled comments.